Hi, my name is Guy Wallace, and in this longer video, we're going to discuss strategic planning for training and development. The strategic alignment of learning systems. Not learning for the sake of learning, but learning for the sake of the business. The content of this video was originally presented at the ISPI conference in 1996. Yes, that's a long time ago. But really, what has changed over all of these years in the strategic alignment of learning systems? I think not much. What we're covering today is inherently complex. Businesses each have unique challenges and opportunities. One size does not fit all. And the systems to address those are never as simple as we wish them to be. At Svensson & Wallace Incorporated, SWI, we had developed a rigorous but flexible process to deal with all of that complexity. My business partner of 15 years from 1982 to 1997, Ray Svensson, is the author and developer of these methods. Addressing all of your complexity is going to allow you to understand the totality of your business, what its challenges are, and what the business needs in terms of human assets development. You want to translate your understanding into training and development issues, what Gary Rumler might have called critical business issues, CBIs. You then want to create a training and development system that's strategically aligned with the priority needs of the business, not with every single need that you can uncover. Back in 1978, Ray Svensson started the business that would later become Svensson & Wallace. He partnered with clients to improve the return on investment and economic value add in order to achieve their strategic intent through the applications of human performance technology, HPT. Our focus as a business was on processes and systems for human asset management, specifically organizational architecture, what is also known as business architecture or process architecture or performance architecture, leading to curriculum architecture and learning architecture. Really, it's an architectural or engineering approach to resourcing the needs of business. We were also involved in developing staffing systems that align to the organizational architecture's need, and training and development that align to that, and assessment that align to that, and rewards and recognition that align to that. All of it as a system, working together as a system to achieve the strategic intent of our clients. We work primarily with Fortune 100 companies, but also with smaller firms and with government agencies and non-profit organizations. I joined Ray in the business in 1982 after leaving Motorola's Training and Education Center, the forerunner to Motorola University. There I worked for Bill Wiggenhorn and worked alongside the late Gary Rumler. Before that I was a course developer at Wicks Lumber in Saginaw, Michigan, and before that I was a journalist in the U.S. Navy. At MTech, I learned about total quality management and enhanced my understanding of human performance technology working alongside Gary Rumler and Carol Panza and many others, including Ray Svensson. I honed my skills at instructional technology that was oriented to performance, that was performance-based, performance-focused. And I enhanced my skills in project planning and management principles and applied them to training and development efforts. My expertise is in human performance analysis, process analysis, and then designing the curriculum architecture, or what's known today as instructional architecture or development architecture or learning architecture, and the design and development of the content, both instruction and information, to meet the needs of the learners who are actually performers in enterprise processes. At Svensson & Wallace, we had two books we published. The Training and Development Strategic Plan Workbook, which won an ISPI award for Outstanding Instructional Communications, and the Quality Roadmap, which presented our approach to business architecture or organizational architecture, and how to systematically derive the needs for the human asset management systems. Those systems that designed the organization and the jobs, that did the succession planning, that did the staffing and recruiting, that did the training and development, the appraisal and performance management systems, the compensation and benefit systems, and the reward and recognition systems. These models have evolved since that book, The Quality Roadmap, was published in 1994. I dare say that we at SWI had the lead in terms of applying strategic planning for training and development to more corporations than anybody else, at the time and since. My role in many of these projects was doing the curriculum architecture work that led to the development of human assets to meet the strategic needs of the business. Not every need of the business. That would not be good stewardship. This session, delivered in 1996 at the ISBI conference, was intended to help the participants begin to assess their current training and development system against the characteristics of a world-class system. They were to determine whether or not strategic planning would have value for them, to develop an initial plan for a project, and to position or sell strategic planning to their senior management. This slide concluded the session open, which was then going to lead to the business need and rationale for strategic planning, and then to an assessment of their current state, then a review of our SWI business and training and development system models, and then a look at our four-phase approach to doing a project, then more planning for a strategic planning project, and then we talked about selling this to management and other stakeholders. And then we summarized the session. Let's take a look at the business need and rationale for conducting a strategic planning for training and development effort. Why do this? Why do this for the needs of the business? In order to become a high-performing organization with a performance culture, training and development is needed as a means to that end. What's also needed is a learning culture, what Sengi covered in the fifth discipline, which really wasn't all about changing the name of your training and development organization to a learning organization and changing the word training to learning everywhere you could. The training and development system that enables a learning culture to become a high-performing culture is key. There are many changes in the business environment. This was true in '96, and it's true today in 2012. The United States of America, as well as the rest of the planet, is going through a major paradigm shift from a craft production and agricultural economy into a mass production and industrial capital-intense economy, and moving into a lean production and information economy. Different organizations are at different places, but I dare say that most of us are on the right edge of this chart. There were a lot of common themes in the new paradigm back in 1996, and this is still true today. The implications to the workforce of an enterprise was the coming disappearance of unskilled work. Not totally, but in a large sense, that was very true. All workers were going to need to become individual problem solvers. Professionals and managers and departments were no longer going to be silos. They were going to be working together in unison as a system. There would be constantly changing role assignments for individuals, and there would be a required redefinition of management. This was going to require both new skills and continuous learning. The implications for the training and development system, or the learning and development system, or the learning organization and its processes, was that peak performance was going to require full skills development of the most critical of the target audiences in the most critical of the processes. Training and development and learning and development efforts would need to be managed as an investment, because the need was simply going to overwhelm the supply of funds and resources to address all needs. These were going to need to be targeted. Learning was going to become part of everyday work versus training as a single event. This was true in 1996, and it's still a current topic today. The shift in organizational learning culture is quite profound. There was no clear focus on strategic knowledge in the past. Training and development was a low management priority. There was a lack of linkage between the learning content and organizational goals. It was basically unmanaged. It was left to the training department and the individual to determine what to invest their time, energy, and resources in. But that's all changed. It was changing in the 1990s, and it's still continuing to change today. Competence, not generic competencies, but performance competence, is treated as the new capital and is managed as such. Training or learning is strategically focused to support business goals. Everyone has an important role in the new learning systems. The learners as performers, their management, the folks in the training and development or learning and development organizations, executive management, suppliers, customers, and the community at large. Training departments must partner with managers and employees to make the training decisions, including what learning events, modular events, performance-based learning content to bring to the market. And should that be deployed in advance of the need and or during the moment of need? But what's this worth to the business? Why should they care about this? What's the return on the investment? Or worse, what's the negative results for not making the investments? Borrowing a concept from the quality movement, the cost of conformance, the cost to bring the current state to the ideal state to meet the needs. That's not necessarily Six Sigma. It could be less than Six Sigma, or in some cases, more than Six Sigma. What are all the costs required to train the workforce to a level of competence? Not to generic competencies, but to the competence that's required on the job. What's it take to define, develop, and deliver that needed content? There's analysis that's required, leading to design of modular content to increase the reuse of content to lower the eventual total costs. There's the development of that content. We need to be smarter and quicker about doing that and do it at less expense. How we deploy or deliver content is critical. New tools and technology enable us to think very differently about this today. How do we administer training? How do we handle the travel and living costs associated when face-to-face development is required? By itself, the cost of conformance may be large enough to scare off your executives. It's going to be way too costly to meet that need. However, the cost of nonconformance, the cost for less than perfect performance or adequate performance, will sink the enterprise ship. For example, the cost of underperforming technology and capital assets, deploying the equipment and the software that has the promise to improve performance, but mishandling that and not having adequately competent people to utilize those assets makes the return on those investments less than the promise. The cost of lost sales, of low productivity, of longer work cycle times, rework and scrap due to errors are huge costs for many organizations. This is due, most often, to the performance competence, or lack thereof, of their human assets. Relative to the cost of conformance, the cost to address this, the cost of nonconformance are probably far greater and much more scary than the former. It is all about return on investment. It's not about ROE, return on expectations, which since the 1920s has stood for return on equity. Please don't go in front of your CFO and talk about ROE only to have them discover late in the conversation that you're talking about something else. Bad move. The return on investment is calculated several different ways. Use the approach that your organization already uses. And if they don't use ROI and they use return on net assets as their primary metric for making business decisions about where to invest, use that instead. ROI is used to compare alternatives. It is misused often when you're looking after the fact to prove the value of what you had previously done. There are way too many variables for you to get an accurate picture of that. But when you're confronted with more opportunities to invest than you can afford, use ROI, or the appropriate metric, to determine where to strategically place your bets. Let's look at a couple of examples of ROI. At a major manufacturing company, automated production processes where there's unscheduled downtime is worth approximately $10,000 an hour. If the maintenance technicians have not received the training on the new process control computers, then in the first 6 months, in this example, if downtime equaled 30%, of which 1/4 could be attributed to training, of course that's a guess, then the return on investment is 312% for addressing that. If the hurdle rate is 200% or 300% or 400%, then that's taken into consideration. The hurdle rate typically refers to what level of return are we expecting before we invest $1, $100, $1,000, $1 million. What kind of return can we get elsewhere? And so the hurdle rate is different for every enterprise. Ask your financial analysts or your CFO about the hurdle rate in your organization. You are competing in investments for training and development or learning and development with all other opportunities in the corporation to invest for a return. In this next example, if 250 service representatives only received informal training and their measured productivity after that was only 50% of the capacity after just 4 months, what would the return on investment or the return on the net assets, the investments in those assets, be? If there was a loaded annual salary of $40,000, the value could be 100% of the people using the workstations times 250 employees at 50% productivity gave $5 million of an annual rate. The cost to address the training, if it was $500,000, would have returned a 9-to-1 ratio, an ROI of 900%. Next, let's do a quick assessment of your training and development system, your learning and development system, against the attributes of a world-class system. Mentally check these off or take some notes. Does your organizational culture value and support full competency development and lifelong learning? Does everyone participate in the training and development system and processes? Is the training and development system driven by performance goals and is performance-based? Are there tight linkages between the training departments and the users of their services? Is there strong executive leadership and participation? What could be termed command and control and collaboration? Are the executives' leadership in charge of where the investments are being made? Or is somebody else making those investment decisions? Are the training and development resources matched to the need and to the objectives? The business needs and the business objectives, not the learning needs and the learning objectives. That comes later. Are the training and development staff competent and include a balanced mix of expertise? The expertise needed to manage and populate the training and development processes. Are there a balanced array of training and development strategies being employed? Are you using the internet and the intranet? Are you using structured and coached on-the-job training? There's much more besides traditional training, classroom training, instructor-led training. Are you taking advantage of social media today and social media learning platforms? Is there a strong administrative coordination of all of the training and development efforts, or is it running amok? Are internal training and development resources being leveraged through appropriate use of outside resources? Are you bringing in subcontractors or contractors to offload peak needs? Or have you built your organization to meet peak needs when that's not the case 100% of the time? The trends in training and development back in 1996 and still true today in 2012 include: there's decentralization of the learning site. No longer is it happening in one set of bricks and mortar. There's action learning being used. You're using the information networks and the personal computer workstations, and today, mobile learning. You're embedding performance support systems in all of this. You're bringing the content to the moment of the need, and perhaps using it prior to that moment of need for the drill and practice required when providing it at the moment of need might be just a little bit too late for things that are complex. Are you using structured on-the-job training? Are you using team learning, etc.? At Svensson & Wallace Incorporated, we built many business and training and development system models. We are architects and engineers. We were architects and engineers, and still are today. Our business model included a business architecture. This is from our 1994 book, The Quality Roadmap. We start on the left with process and performance requirements. There are various business drivers that lead to various business metrics that lead to the implementation of various business processes. And those business processes can then be used to articulate what are the human performance requirements or human performance models. Business processes and the human performance models allow us to systematically derive the infrastructure requirements. What human assets and human asset systems do we need to have in place? What environmental assets and environmental asset management systems do we need to have in place? For example, the human asset management system on the right would include organizational architecture. How have we organized ourselves into various departmental entities or teams or jobs or roles? How have we staffed that? How have we conducted the training and development? How are we assessing human performance? How are we conducting rewards and recognitions? Is it all aligned back to the business drivers of the business architecture? That's the key question. Although this graphic is hard to see, the business architecture of a training and development system falls along similar lines. There's assets and competencies of training. Either we have the assets we need and the competencies, or we do not. We have many stakeholders, not just shareholders, not just customers, not just learners. There's many stakeholders for every training and development organization. There's a business environment that we must be consistent with. There are key training metrics and training processes that we must put in place and attend to. And then there's the human asset infrastructure and the environmental asset infrastructure. Some of the training and development business drivers include the assets and competencies that are required. Do we have the available courseware? Do we have the production capabilities that we need? Do we have the delivery infrastructure or the access structure of wikis? Do we have the proper analysis data? And do we have the proper staff? Do we have the proper competencies, the performance competencies for conducting front-end analysis or curriculum architecture design or instructional design and then development? Do we have the competencies for just-in-time delivery and developing customer solutions that are often custom solutions? Do we understand who our stakeholders are and what their needs and requirements and constraints are? What their needs are today, right now, and how we're doing against those needs? What their short-term and medium and long-term needs are going to be, and are we at the ready to meet those? Or what will we have to do to be at the ready when the need arrives? We are in a business environment where the rate of change and all sorts of factors are constantly evolving. Today, the only constant is constant change. Are we prepared? Are we and our systems and processes and resources robust enough to change with those changing requirements? What are the metrics that we use to assess how well we're doing, to set targets and goals, and then to measure against those? Do we have a performance index in place that is reflected in our scorecard? Do we understand the benefits, the value that we bring to the business? Do we understand what the value is of the business needs being met? What's that value of the return? What's the investment cost? And what's the ROI? What are the costs of the training needs not being met because we don't have the resources needed or the competencies needed? What is the cost of our unnecessary training? The training that we deploy to everyone, whether they need it or not. The training that we force people through when they already have the performance competencies or knowledge that that content leads to. Our own training and development system has processes, leadership processes, core processes that make us very different from all other organizational entities, and support processes. Our own training and development infrastructure requirements address both human assets and the infrastructure to support those, and our environmental assets and the infrastructure to support that. An example of 4 major infrastructure elements include the training organization structure itself, a governance structure, a workplace learning system, and delivery and access systems. Here's an example of a training and development organization system. You can see that training and development or learning development resources in terms of people and roles might be deployed across the organization and not simply centralized. A governance structure enables the organization to provide command and control and collaboration with the training and development resources and people. As an example, an executive education board might exist with the top leaders from all of the business units or divisions, however you've organized your enterprise. Then there might be discipline curriculum councils. There might be one for the sales and marketing organization and people, for the engineering and manufacturing people, for the staff groups, etc. There could be business unit training councils where they use all of those disciplines within their business unit, but their focus is on accomplishing the goals of their business. And depending on the complexity of your organization, you might have local training committees or councils at various locations. You may require a training administrative council to oversee all of the needs and meeting all of those needs in a business smart, a business wise, a business oriented approach. An example workplace learning system might use many different means to the ends of getting the right content to the right people at the right time, just enough and just in time. An example learning center might include both classroom facilities, simulators and labs, a resource library, various learning terminals or computer stations. There's tracking of results against standard measures. There's an information center where you're archiving all of the learning content, instruction, and information that enables performance. And there's administration of all of this. You may be delivering and making available all of your content through various modes. Traditional lecture and discussion in group-paced, instructor-driven kinds of things, where there's case studies and action learning in a laboratory, or you're using video. Or there's more self-paced means, including conventional paper and pencil media, or you're reading PDFs. You're using computer-based training, or today e-learning. This was, after all, 1996. Simulations and labs, again video, expert systems, electronic performance support systems, or today performance systems, or mobile learning, which is more about accessibility to performance aids and job aids than traditional instruction. Tutorials, structured and unstructured on-the-job training, and rotational work assignments, the internet and the intranet, many means to the ends of deploying the right content. What can we do to implement a business-driven training and development system? Well, we can develop a strategic plan for doing such. We can implement and improve the training and development systems, making targeted, sufficient investments to achieve the business results that are required. Not learning for the sake of learning, but learning for the sake of the business. Note, just because trainers are skilled at uncovering training requirements does not in and of itself warrant meeting those requirements. I've been preaching that for decades now. It's not all about learning for the sake of learning. It's about learning for the sake of the business and for the shareholders' equities return. Return on equity, not return on expectations. A strategic plan for training and development is a cumulative composition of several outputs from each phase of our four-phase process. It defines what the high priority business challenges and goals are, what the late Gary Rumler called critical business issues. That's where the focus needs to be, not on the low-hanging fruit of everybody's needs every day. It defines the training and development products that are needed to achieve the high priority business goals, and defines the systems needed to acquire and to develop and to deploy and to administrate all of this. It provides a comprehensive business plan for meeting those needs according to the business priorities. It calculates return on investment via the cost of conformance and compares that to the cost of non-conformance. There is a return for investing in training and development systems, and there is a return for doing nothing at all. What are the questions answered by the plan? Let's now take a look at Svensson & Wallace Incorporated's four-phase gated process for conducting a strategic planning for training and development effort. Of course, these four phases can be modified to meet your needs. This is just where we typically started from in developing a plan and conducting a project. In Phase 1, strategic vision and goals are articulated. In Phase 2, an investment plan is calculated. In Phase 3, a training business architecture is designed. In Phase 4, an implementation plan is produced to get you from where you're starting to your end goals. The outputs of Phase 1 leading to the Phase 2 efforts are an articulation of the training implications of the business challenges and the various business plans that are in place, whether they are documented formally or whether they are just known by the business executives informally. There's an assessment of the existing training and development system's ability to meet those business challenges and plans. A mission and philosophy and the roles for training and development in context with all other roles is articulated, and a strategic vision and goals for training and development are articulated as well. This is the flow in Phase 1. Key to Phase 1 is interviewing the executives, determining what their most significant challenges are right now and what they will be in the near term, the midterm, and the long term, depending on how far out your organization typically plans. What strategies and goals have they articulated and established to address meeting these challenges, their plans? What groups of people will be needing new knowledge and skills for these goals to be achieved? Perhaps they thought about this already, and perhaps not. This can be quite eye-opening to the executives who are charging ahead to achieve their strategies. In Phase 2, the flow is thus. At the the conclusion of Phase 2, there's an executive review. It's a major financial decision point. The purpose of this is to gain commitment for the resources for the 3 to 5 year plan prior to making investment in the design of the necessary organizational support systems. If they're not willing to pony up the money, the resources, the time and efforts of all the people that will be required, there's no sense designing the future state. The criteria should include alternatives that are clear with varying levels of resource requirements, not just one picture of how to accomplish this. The business needs are addressed to varying levels. The trade-offs and risks associated with the alternatives are clear and realistic. Some tips are, let the executives make the decision and provide the alternatives to them, but let them choose. The resource requirements are likely to be greater than current levels. They should be forewarned about that. However, many will already expect that. Once you have received approval for the investment plan, you would move into Phase 3 and do a business architecture for the training and development system. What gets produced typically in Phase 3 includes a results measurement plan, the process maps and the measures of those processes for their outputs and for the processes themselves, and an evolution plan for the organization structure, how to get the organization from where it is today to where it needs to be ultimately. The implementation of a governance and advisory structure, a staffing strategy, technology and information systems strategies, facility strategies, financial strategies, and how to gain supervisor and management supports, and to provide them the support systems that they need to participate in this, in a command and control and collaborative approach. The flow in Phase 3 typically looks like this. Another key review of the executives at the end of Phase 3, in what might be called a gate review meeting, is to approve the training business architecture and the preliminary plans to get there. The purpose is to approve the plans before conducting the extensive implementation and detailed planning that would be required. The criteria includes the decisions that require executive input, providing alternatives and detail where needed. Tips include minimizing the need for executive time and attention, keeping decisions at a high level where possible. Avoid getting bogged down in the details of the decisions. However, have those details in your back pocket should they be called for. The results measurement plan is key. It should have a hierarchy of the measures or metrics to be used, a strategy for collecting and storing the data, a plan for a system of regular reports to the stakeholders, a plan for developing and implementing such a system. The process maps and measure elements include the macro process mapping to identify all of the training and development processes required. It's more than just some ADDIE-like development process. Process maps would include individual training processes, for example, the development of courseware, and performance measures for each process, including the process itself and the outputs in terms of cost, cycle time, and quality. The technology and information system elements would include high-level specifications for the technologies to be acquired and deployed. For example, distance learning, social media, video conferencing. A deployment strategy, training and development information system architecture including integration with other information systems, and high-level specifications for the information system. The facility strategy elements might include the kinds of training facilities that will be needed, the locations, the capacity requirements over some planning horizon, perhaps 5 to 10 years, perhaps 3 to 5, what the costs will be, what the risk of obsolescence will be with ever-changing training technologies. The financial strategy elements would include development budgets, operations budgets, capital budgets, a system for data collection and financial control, a policy on financial accountability to whom and for what, a plan to develop and implement the system. The supervisor and manager support system elements would include information systems and communication channels, job aids and procedures, training for the supervisors and managers on how to use the system, and training coordinator to support their needs. Once Phase 3 is signed off, you can begin to do Phase 4, the detailed planning for what was articulated at a much higher level in Phase 3. Phase 4 outputs would include a detailed implementation plan with all of the activities, the milestones for monitoring progress and costs, assignment of all accountabilities for activities and outputs, resource allocations for these implementation tasks, and tracking the progress and reporting. This is all finally documented in the strategic training plan, which is not sprung on the executives in all of its total glory. They were brought along all the way through the mechanisms of their roles in this 4-phase process, and they have been making key business decisions about the training and development system at every stage. The flow of Phase 4 might look like this. The final review of the Strategic Training and Development Plan as a draft to possibly be amended and or approved provides visibility for the next steps post-effort to actually implement it and put it all in place. Stage 2, if you will. The criteria is that the plan covers the next phase at a task level. Milestones and deliverables are clearly defined and articulated. Individual accountabilities are clearly identified. Time frames are reasonable but within management's expectations. Resources are identified that would be adequate to accomplish the objectives of the plan. The tips. No surprises at this point. People listed in the plan should be aware of and have agreed to their roles and their levels of participation. If no executive decisions are required, this review can be a briefing or a memo or a video. Socializing the plan up front will help ensure a go decision. Having all the right people involved back in Phase 1 is critical to this. Bring them along. Don't surprise them at the end. Yes, there will be barriers to overcome. Management's attention is critical. They're probably busy focused elsewhere and perhaps not giving much thought to this. However, that's not always the case. There will be barriers of a lack of money resources and the other time and other resources necessary to do this implementation work. How will you carve out those resources and that time given the current state of the business and how busy everybody already is today? Post-effort ongoing executive status reviews will be required. The purpose is to review the progress towards the plan, adapt to any change requirements that are necessary, and adapt the associated resource requirements, and also, most importantly, to maintain project visibility, both what is being done and the needs that it will address. So if this isn't too much, perhaps you're interested in planning a strategic plan for training and development. Before you even really start phase 1, or at the very beginning of phase 1, you've got to conduct some phase 0 activities. Project planning and management, also known as organizing the planning project or effort. The purpose is to document the scope, the roles, the project activities for the team and management. You want to track and communicate progress and changes with respect to the project tasks for the team and for management. Establishing the scope, the goal, the time frame, and negotiating for all resources. Of course, this is ongoing throughout the entire project. A major key to your success or failure will be in the way you organize and manage the project plan. The risks of poor project planning and management are the fail to complete a quality plan, to create an armchair plan that's not detailed enough or realistic enough or real enough to truly be successful. The failure to obtain political support for the plan. This will be quite key. Stumbling over organizational roadblocks to implement the plan. You need to know who's for it and who's against it, and for whatever reasons they have. The project planning and management steps include scoping the entire project. Is this for the entire enterprise? Is this for one of the major business units or several? Or what? Recruiting an executive sponsor who shares the vision of the need for this and what it will accomplish for the business. Selecting the planning team, the steering team, the working team, the planning staff, etc. This has political implications. You need to wire into the organizational politics as you populate these teams. Selecting the project leader and drafting the project plan. Reviewing that plan with all and getting commitments from all members of the planning team. You need to obtain the support from the executive sponsor and the steering team. Allow no surprises. Don't go into a big meeting and surprise everybody. They should have been informed prior to that meeting. Their concerns should have been taken into account in any adjustments, or you should be at the ready to answer their concerns, their questions. You assign a data manager. You'll be generating lots of data and you'll need to keep track of it and keep track of all the changes to the data set. You want to collect, manage, and disseminate data, information, and knowledge. You're going to utilize information systems to collect and manage that data. You're going to build consensus. You're going to inform people. You're going to negotiate over their issues and their concerns. And you're going to be making decisions so that you can move forward. You need to do detailed project planning. This is the template that we used at SWI. This is a planning template that I still use today. Once you have a sponsor and you develop the rudimentary plan, now you need to sell the need for conducting such a project. How do you sell this? I had the opportunity at Motorola in the early 80s to work with Neil Rackham of spin selling fame. So we tend to use the spin framework in all of our sales and negotiating and persuasion processes. First, you establish the situation. Yours may be different. Then you establish the problems within that situation. Then, out of all of the problems that are uncovered and agreed upon, you determine what the implications are. Are these small potatoes or big potatoes, so to speak? And then you finally conclude with what is the need to be paid off? What is the return for these investments? And you may not even need to talk about the investment costs, but simply what's the cost of nonconformance for doing nothing at all, and what's the cost then to conform? What's that return possible, and what are the risks to be avoided? As we said earlier, this is quite complex. But this puts top management in control. They live with the consequences for success or failure. This will develop credibility with line management, having gone through a thorough process and approach to articulating a strategic plan for training and development. It creates a comprehensive system to focus on high-priority business needs, not just everyday needs, not the needs of the masses, but targeted needs with significant return on investment implications or significant cost of non-conformance implications. It realigns training with the changing business paradigm. Training becomes a proactive rather than reactive function, and it eliminates wasted time and money spent on low priority areas, which is too often where training is focused. We learned a lot of lessons in all of our work with our corporate clients. Using a large work team drawn from across the organization helps with buy-in to communicate back to those organizations what the project is doing. But it often stretches the project schedule. It's a balancing act. Time is required for the team to learn, and there's all the logistics of scheduling meetings and meeting everybody's individual schedules. Organizing best practice visits, including both for the executive groups and the working team, has a very high payoff, but it's difficult logistically. Performing external benchmarking requires a great deal of scheduling time. Pre-selling the business units and all of the discipline organizations and the company level executives is quite essential to gaining their commitment, but it requires a lot of time and hard work. You need to front-end load your approach to this, acknowledge that this exists, that this will be somewhat time-consuming before you can really get going, but it is quite necessary. Selling a resource budget based on high-level needs assessment, where the company has no experience with some of the services, can be quite difficult and will be challenged. Having executive sponsorship throughout the project really pays off. Having a combination of line and human resource sponsors is most ideal. Getting the right sponsor, the right steering team, and the right working team, of course, is critical. Obtaining the executive commitment approval at the key milestones is critical before you kick off, and all of the midpoint reviews and the final approval at the end of Phase 4. Having a clear linkage to the business strategies and needs is not just essential, it is most essential. And dedicating project managers to this is a key to success. Once you've gone through the 4 phases, it may be necessary to conduct annual updates, or more often, to keep all of the executives, all of the sponsors, all of the businesses that will live with the consequences for your success or failure in the implementation informed. Human competence is the competitive edge. It's not about competencies, generic competencies that we may use to begin assessing people in an HR realm. It's about the specific performance competence that's required to meet the needs of the business. I'm no longer with Svensson & Wallace Incorporated. We dissolved that business in 1997. This presentation was from 1996, but it's now 2012. My business partner of 15 years, Ray Svensson, wrote the book on strategic planning for training and development. Literally. Ray and our partner Karen Wallace and myself also wrote the Quality Roadmap with the help of Bruce Wexler. This is where we articulated the business architecture. The book was published in 1994 after we had done some work with the Council for Continuous Improvement in using and pulling together all of our models to support their needs for educating their worlds for continuous improvement purposes. Later on, I wrote the book Lean ISD about designing curriculum architectures and doing the new product development, sometimes known as ADDIE, in modular curriculum development and acquisition. I also wrote a book on training and development systems views, looking at the 47 processes that are typical in a training and development or learning and development organization. If you're going to be process-oriented for your customers, you need to be process-oriented for yourself. I also wrote a book on management areas of performance to help analysts as well as managers articulate what the requirements were for them specifically, what their performance requirements were, what their performance competencies were versus generic competencies. Ray and I also came together to write the Performance-Based Employee Qualification and Certification Systems book. This addressed all of the processes in this 3x3 structure on the cover that included development of performance tests, not necessarily knowledge tests, although sometimes those are necessary, but to focus on the terminal performance requirements. Can people perform? Are they performance competent? Recently, I reconfigured all of my books, many articles and columns and book chapters and blog postings into a new book 6-pack. Key in that is the Curriculum Manager's Handbook for dealing with all aspects of their job, including strategic planning, which we've just covered. Also in this 6-pack is the ultimate goal for a training and development organization, in my view, and that is moving from training to performance improvement consulting. Because it's not about learning, it's about performance. Where performance competence is the ability to perform tasks, to produce outputs to all of the stakeholder requirements. In an enterprise learning context, just because an ISD practitioner can identify a valid learning need does not in and of itself warrant meeting that need. Only comparative return on investment projections based on valid estimates of risks and rewards and the investment costs for the life cycle of the need should be the basis for meeting any need or not. Good stewardship in learning targets analysis and development and approaches design in ways to increase content shareability and improve authenticity of that content. Good stewards achieve significant ROI. It's not about learning, it's about performance.